For decades, people were told a simple formula: work hard, save consistently, pay off the house, and retirement would eventually take care of itself. The finish line seemed clear. Put money aside for long enough, and one day your investments would do the rest. But in 2026, that formula is being challenged like never before. Inflation has changed the math. Healthcare costs have changed the math. Longer life expectancy has changed the math. The retirement plan that looked perfectly reasonable 10 or 20 years ago suddenly looks very different today. Millions of people are now discovering something deeply uncomfortable. The retirement number they spent years chasing may no longer be enough. A target that once felt ambitious now feels ordinary. Numbers that once sounded impossible are suddenly being discussed as the new normal. That's why the real question isn't whether you'll be able to retire. The real question is whether you'll be able to stay retired. So where did these massive retirement numbers come from? Did retirement suddenly become unaffordable, or are people being scared into saving more than they actually need? By the end of this video, you'll understand why retirement targets have exploded, where the famous $3 million number actually comes from, why some retirees can live comfortably with far less, why others may need even more, and most importantly, how to figure out which category you fall into before it's too late to change course. Chapter 1. The retirement number kept moving. For a long time, retirement felt like a problem with a clear answer. Save enough money, reach the magic number, and one day work would become optional. For many Americans and Britons, that number was $500,000. It wasn't considered luxury money. It was simply the amount people believed would buy them peace of mind. Then, the number moved. Suddenly, financial experts started talking about $1 million as if it had always been the target. $500,000 no longer sounded safe. It sounded risky. People adjusted their expectations, convinced themselves they were simply being realistic, and kept saving. Then the number moved again. 1 million became 2 million. 2 million became 3 million. Today, it isn't unusual to see headlines asking whether even $3 million will be enough to retire comfortably. At some point, the conversation stopped feeling motivating and started feeling frightening. Because if the finish line keeps moving, how is anyone supposed to catch it? Who decided that a comfortable retirement suddenly costs 6 times more than it used to? Did the financial industry quietly raise the target? Are people being scared into saving more than they actually need? Or did something much bigger happen beneath the surface while everyone was busy focusing on their careers and monthly bills? Because the truth is, the retirement number didn't change by accident. A series of powerful forces quietly rewrote the rules of retirement. And the first one has been quietly shrinking purchasing power year after year, often without people even noticing it happening. Chapter 2. Inflation quietly changed everything. Imagine someone retired in the year 2000 with a plan that looked almost perfect on paper. They calculated their expenses, built a nest egg, and estimated that $50,000 a year would give them a comfortable life. It wasn't a luxurious retirement, but it was enough for travel, groceries, healthcare, and the occasional dinner out without constantly worrying about money. Back then, that calculation made sense. The problem is that inflation never stopped working. It kept showing up every year, quietly increasing the cost of groceries, energy bills, insurance, housing, transportation, and almost everything else people need to live. Most of the increases looked harmless on their own. A little more for food here, a little more for healthcare there. Nothing dramatic enough to make headlines on its own. But inflation doesn't work all at once. It works like a slow leak. And after 20 or 30 years, that slow leak can completely change the picture. A retirement lifestyle that cost $50,000 a year in 2000 would require dramatically more money to maintain today. Yet millions of people are still building retirement plans using numbers that belong to a different decade and a different economy. That's what makes inflation so dangerous. It doesn't announce itself. It quietly turns yesterday's retirement plan into tomorrow's financial shortfall. But as powerful as inflation has been, it isn't the force that scares retirement experts the most. The biggest challenge waiting for retirees is something many people actually dream of having. Chapter 3. The Healthcare Time Bomb. When most people imagine retirement, they picture replacing a paycheck. They calculate how much money they'll need for groceries, holidays, utility bills, and maybe a few extra dinners out each month. The assumption feels reasonable. If you spent a certain amount while working, you'll probably need something similar after you stop. But retirement has a way of introducing expenses that don't arrive gradually. They arrive all at once. A surgery you didn't plan for. A prescription that suddenly becomes permanent. Specialist appointments that become monthly rather than yearly. Long-term care that nobody wanted to think about 20 years earlier. This is where many retirement plans quietly begin to break down. Because while people spend decades preparing for the cost of retirement, far fewer prepare for the cost of getting older. And the numbers can be surprisingly large. Many retirees underestimate healthcare costs by hundreds of thousands of dollars over the course of retirement, not because they made poor decisions or ignored financial advice, but because healthcare expenses are one of the hardest costs to predict decades in advance. That's the moment many people realize something important. Retirement isn't simply about replacing income. It's about building enough financial resilience to absorb expenses that can arrive unexpectedly and demand immediate attention. But as expensive as healthcare can become, there is another risk that worries retirement planners even more. Ironically, it's the very thing most people spend their entire working lives hoping for. Chapter 4. Living Too Long for Most of Human History. Retirement planning had a very different problem than it does today. People weren't worried about outliving their savings. In many cases, they were worried about not living long enough to enjoy retirement at all. Reaching your late 70s or 80s was far less common. And the idea of needing income for 30 years without working simply wasn't part of the financial conversation. Today, that problem has completely flipped. Modern medicine, better healthcare, and higher living standards have given millions of people something previous generations rarely experienced: a very long retirement. At first glance, that sounds like wonderful news. After all, who wouldn't want more years to travel, spend time with family, pursue hobbies, and enjoy the freedom they spent decades working to earn? But every extra year creates a new financial question. Who is going to pay for it? Because retiring at 65 no longer means funding 10 or 15 years without a paycheck. For many people, retirement could last 25 years. For others, 30 years is becoming increasingly common. Some couples retiring today may need their investments to support them for 35 or even 40 years. Suddenly, the retirement portfolio has a much bigger job than most people realize. It doesn't just need to survive retirement. It needs to survive inflation, market crashes, recessions, healthcare surprises, and decades of withdrawals while somehow continuing to grow in the background. A portfolio that only lasts 20 years isn't successful if the retiree lives for 30. This changes the math completely. The goal is no longer simply reaching retirement. The goal is building enough financial strength to stay retired for the rest of your life, no matter how long that life turns out to be. And that brings us to the question that has been quietly hanging over this entire conversation. If inflation made retirement more expensive, healthcare made retirement less predictable, and longer lives made retirement much longer, then where exactly did this famous $3 million retirement number actually come from? Chapter 5. The Birth of the $3 million Retirement. After inflation, healthcare costs, and longer life expectancy, it's finally time to answer the question that has been hanging over this entire video. Where did the $3 million retirement number actually come from? The surprising answer is that the number isn't random. It wasn't invented by financial companies trying to scare people, and it isn't some secret target that every retiree suddenly has to reach. The number comes from something much simpler: spending. Imagine two neighbors retiring on the same day. They are the same age, they invested in similar portfolios, and both expect to live for another 30 years. The only difference is lifestyle. One household plans to spend around $40,000 per year. The other wants $120,000. Immediately, the math starts pulling them in completely different directions. This is where one of the most important ideas in retirement planning enters the picture. Many planners use a withdrawal guideline that assumes retirees can safely withdraw roughly 4% of their portfolio each year without running out of money too quickly. Suddenly, the famous $3 million number stops looking mysterious. If someone wants to spend around $120,000 per year in retirement, they would need a portfolio of roughly $3 million to support that lifestyle under those assumptions. And that's the moment many people experience a strange mix of relief and surprise. Because the number was never really about age. It was never really about income. And it certainly wasn't about keeping up with someone else's retirement target. It was always about lifestyle. The uncomfortable truth is that retirement numbers don't come from calculators first. They come from choices. Which raises an even more interesting question. If spending creates the retirement number, why do some people retire comfortably with less than $1 million while others feel nervous with $3 million sitting in the bank? Chapter 6. Why some people retire comfortably with much less. Imagine two people walking into retirement on the exact same day. The first retiree has just under $900,000 invested. The second has more than $3 million sitting across retirement accounts, pensions, and investments. If you asked most people which one sleeps better at night, the answer would seem obvious. But retirement has a strange way of breaking assumptions. The retiree with $900,000 owns a modest home, enjoys simple hobbies, travels occasionally, and spends carefully without feeling deprived. Their expenses are predictable. Their expectations are realistic. And their investments comfortably support the life they actually want to live. The retiree with $3 million tells a very different story. There is the large house to maintain, expensive holidays that have become expectations rather than luxuries, rising property taxes, multiple vehicles, private memberships, and a lifestyle built around spending levels that quietly continued rising throughout their working years. Despite having more than 3 times as much money, the fear remains exactly the same. What if it isn't enough? This is one of the biggest surprises in retirement planning. Financial stress doesn't always disappear when wealth increases. Sometimes it simply grows alongside lifestyle expectations. That's why two retirees can look at the same economy, the same stock market, and the same headlines, and feel completely different emotions. One feels secure with $900,000. The other worries with $3 million. Because retirement isn't a competition against other people's portfolios. It's a calculation based on your own lifestyle. And once you understand that, another uncomfortable truth begins to appear. If lifestyle plays such a powerful role in retirement success, then the biggest threat to retirement may not be low investment returns at all. It might be something people spend their entire careers accidentally building without ever noticing. Chapter 7. The retirement industry's biggest secret. After hearing numbers like $1 million, $2 million, or even $3 million, it's easy to start believing there must be some universal retirement target that everyone is supposed to reach. Somewhere out there, hidden inside a calculator or financial planning software. People imagine there must be a single number that separates a successful retirement from a failed one. The truth is far less dramatic. One of the biggest secrets in retirement planning is that there has never been a universal retirement number. There never will be. The reason those large numbers appear everywhere is simple. Headlines about million-dollar retirements attract attention. A headline asking whether you need $3 million to retire spreads much faster than a headline explaining that retirement planning is highly personal and depends on dozens of variables. Big numbers create fear. Fear creates clicks. But retirement doesn't care about headlines. Retirement cares about math. At its core, every retirement number comes down to 3 things and only 3 things: lifestyle, time, and risk. Lifestyle determines how much money leaves your portfolio every year. Time determines how many years your investments need to support that spending. Risk determines how conservative or aggressive your financial plan needs to be in order to survive market downturns, inflation, and unexpected expenses. Change any one of those 3 variables, and the retirement number changes with it. That's why one person can retire comfortably with $800,000, while another genuinely needs $3 million or more. Neither person is wrong. They're simply solving different equations. And once you understand that, something interesting happens. The giant retirement number that once felt intimidating starts to lose its power. Because the goal was never to reach somebody else's number. The goal was always to understand your own. Chapter 8. The real goal was never $3 million. After everything we've covered, inflation, healthcare costs, longer life expectancy, and rising retirement targets, it's easy to walk away believing that retirement is simply a race to accumulate the biggest number possible. Somewhere along the way, many people stopped asking what retirement was supposed to give them and started focusing only on what their investment account was supposed to say. But nobody wakes up in the morning dreaming about $3 million. Nobody spends their career thinking, if only I could see a certain number on a screen, then I'll finally be happy. People don't actually want $3 million. They want what they believe $3 million can buy. They want the freedom to choose how they spend their time instead of selling it. They want the ability to say yes to experiences and no to obligations. They want to be present for family moments that work schedules once forced them to miss. They want to travel without counting vacation days, help their children or grandchildren when needed, and sleep peacefully without worrying about the next economic headline. In other words, people aren't chasing money. They're chasing freedom, time, choices, family, travel, and security. Money is simply the vehicle that helps them get there. And that's why comparing your retirement number to someone else's is one of the fastest ways to create unnecessary anxiety. Someone else's dream retirement may involve luxury travel, multiple homes, and expensive hobbies. Yours may involve a quiet home near family, a garden, and the freedom to wake up without an alarm clock. Neither dream is better. They're simply different destinations requiring different vehicles. The real mistake isn't retiring with less than $3 million. The real mistake is spending decades chasing a number without ever asking yourself what that number was supposed to do for you in the first place. By this point, the goal isn't to find the perfect retirement number. The goal is to find your retirement number. Start with something surprisingly simple. Your spending. Not your income, not your salary, and not the number someone on the internet told you to aim for. Your spending is the foundation of your retirement plan, because retirement isn't about replacing a paycheck. It's about funding a lifestyle. Next, estimate what that lifestyle might look like in retirement. Some expenses may disappear, others may increase. The important part isn't getting the number perfect today. It's getting close enough to start making better decisions tomorrow. Then put your assumptions under pressure. Ask yourself what happens if inflation stays higher than expected, for longer than expected. Ask yourself what happens if retirement lasts 30 years instead of 20. The people who struggle most in retirement are rarely the people who ask too many questions. Make healthcare part of the conversation early, not after it becomes urgent. It is one of the largest and least predictable expenses many retirees will ever face, and pretending it won't happen has never been a successful financial strategy. Finally, revisit your retirement number every year. Your lifestyle changes, the economy changes, markets change, and your goals change. Retirement planning isn't a one-time calculation. It's an ongoing conversation with your future self. And before you leave, ask yourself one question. If you could guarantee the lifestyle you truly wanted for the rest of your life, what number would actually make you feel financially free? Because that number may be very different from the one the headlines keep telling you to chase. And if today's number surprised you, wait until you see what inflation alone can do to a retirement portfolio over 30 years. That may completely change the way you think about retirement planning.